He built one of the most powerful empires in technology, a company that runs the data behind banks, governments, and nations. Yet for all his mastery of systems, Larry Ellison has spent a lifetime fighting the one thing he could never fully command: himself. He is the man who turned defiance into philosophy, who made control his religion and chaos his language. Oracle was his fortress, not just of code, but of ego, of hunger, of survival. Every line of software he created was a declaration. I will not be ordinary. He was the orphan who became a billionaire, the outsider who became a ruler. He built databases that ordered the world, but his own life remained gloriously unordered. Fast cars, faster decisions, endless battles for dominance. He once said, "When you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room." So he built rooms where only he could lead. For Ellison, control wasn't about money. It was about certainty, a shield against the chaos he was born into. To control data was to control truth, and truth, to him, was the rarest currency of all. He is the last of the Silicon Valley samurai, proud, relentless, merciless in pursuit of perfection, a man who sees the world as code to be rewritten, enemies as bugs to be removed, and emotions as errors in the system. But beneath the arrogance lies a question he could never debug. What happens when the man who wants to control everything realizes that control itself is an illusion? He conquered technology. He conquered business. But peace, that was the one empire Larry Ellison could never build. Larry Ellison's story didn't begin in a boardroom or a computer lab. It began in chaos. He was born in 1944 in a poor neighborhood of the Bronx, New York, the unwanted child of a teenage mother who couldn't afford to raise him. When he was 9 months old, she handed him to her aunt and uncle in Chicago and disappeared from his life. The man who became his adoptive father, Lewis Ellison, was a stern, frustrated veteran who worked a modest government job and constantly reminded Larry of his insignificance. "You'll never amount to anything," he'd say. For a boy who came from nothing, those words were not prophecy, they were fuel. Larry grew up angry, curious, and defiant. He didn't just want to prove his father wrong. He wanted to prove that the entire world was wrong. He found his escape in logic, in the order of mathematics, the precision of science, and the cold, beautiful language of machines. When he first touched a computer in the 1960s, he felt something close to reverence. The machine didn't care where he came from. It didn't care about his name, his past, or his flaws. All it respected was correctness. All it obeyed was control. He said later, "The computer was the first thing in my life that ever made sense." At the University of Illinois, he was brilliant but restless. Rules irritated him. Authority insulted him. When his adoptive mother died during his sophomore year, he dropped out without hesitation. He tried again at Berkeley, but the lectures bored him and the professors annoyed him. He left again, this time for good. 2 unfinished degrees, no direction, and no apology. He moved to California with nothing but instinct. It was the 1970s, the dawn of Silicon Valley. The air smelled of rebellion and invention. Larry fit right in. He took programming jobs for small companies, absorbing everything. The technology, the arrogance, the sense that the future was being built by misfits. But even then, he wasn't content to be another engineer. He questioned everything: why code was written a certain way, why managers made certain decisions, why so many people accepted mediocrity. He was abrasive, impatient, and absolutely unafraid of conflict. He'd walk out of meetings mid-sentence, saying, "You're wrong, and I don't have time for wrong." That edge, that refusal to conform, became his armor. He didn't have wealth, pedigree, or education. What he had was audacity. He often quoted Nietzsche, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe." While others sought inclusion, Larry sought independence. He refused to blend in. He learned early that outsiders don't wait for permission, they rewrite the rules from the margins. In Chicago, he'd been told he wasn't enough. In California, he decided to become too much. By the mid-1970s, he was no longer just a programmer. He was a visionary looking for a system big enough to challenge and an idea dangerous enough to believe in. The boy who grew up powerless was about to build the ultimate weapon, a machine that could turn information into control. Larry Ellison didn't want to belong to the world. He wanted to reprogram it. In the mid-1970s, Silicon Valley was a wild frontier, a landscape of dusty garages, glowing terminals, and young dreamers chasing digital gods. Larry Ellison was 30 years old, broke, brilliant, and allergic to authority. He drifted through programming jobs, never staying long enough to grow comfortable. But somewhere between rebellion and boredom, he found his obsession, data. He believed the future would belong not to those who built machines, but to those who controlled what flowed through them, information. While working for a small software company, he came across an obscure research paper from IBM describing something radical, the relational database. It promised that information could be stored, retrieved, and organized with elegance, a system that could think like logic itself. IBM wrote the theory. Larry saw the empire. He studied it line by line, night after night, realizing that no one at IBM was bold enough to turn it into reality. They had the blueprint, he later said, but no courage. That word courage would define his career. In 1907, in a cramped office in Santa Clara, Larry founded a company with two colleagues, Bob Miner and Ed Oates. They called it Software Development Laboratories, later renamed Oracle, after a CIA project they were secretly working on. Larry liked the name. It suggested prophecy, power, and the divine right to know what others didn't. They had no funding, no reputation, and barely enough equipment to keep the lights on. But they had clarity, a mission to build a database so advanced that even giants would have to bow to it. Larry pushed his team like a general preparing for war. He didn't tolerate hesitation. Work smart, he said, but if you can't, work longer. Oracle wasn't just code, it was conviction. Larry wanted software that could command, not request, predict, not respond. He believed that control of data meant control of destiny. And he was right. Within a few years, their product, Oracle Database, became the backbone of modern business. Banks, governments, corporations, everyone needed what Larry had built, a digital brain to store and process the lifeblood of civilization. But he wasn't content with success. He wanted dominance. He undercut IBM's prices, mocked competitors, and pushed impossible deadlines. He promised features that didn't exist yet, then forced his engineers to invent them before delivery. It was reckless, audacious, and somehow effective. He called it building the plane while flying it. Oracle grew like a wildfire, unpredictable, uncontrollable, unstoppable. By the early 1980s, it became one of the fastest-growing companies in the Valley. The press called Larry the corporate samurai, a man who ruled with precision and arrogance in equal measure. He didn't deny it. "I'd rather be feared than ignored," he once said. He had turned an idea into an empire, and an empire into a mirror of himself. Fast, brilliant, ruthless, and impossible to tame. The boy who was once dismissed as a failure had created the world's first database dynasty. But Larry Ellison wasn't done building. He wanted more than systems. He wanted to reshape the logic of power itself, and Oracle would be his weapon. By the mid-1980s, Oracle had exploded into one of the fastest-growing software companies in history. Its name carried both awe and fear. Inside the glass offices of Silicon Valley, competitors whispered the same phrase, "You don't fight Ellison, you survive him." He had turned business into battle strategy, into blood sport, and code into a weapon. Larry Ellison didn't believe in peace. He believed in momentum. Every meeting was a duel, every launch a campaign. He admired Sun Tzu's The Art of War, memorized passages from samurai codes, and ran Oracle like a dojo, disciplined, ruthless, obsessed with victory. "I don't want balance," he told his executives. "Balance is for people who stop moving." At its peak, Oracle was hiring hundreds a month and selling software faster than it could be written. Ellison's philosophy was simple: sell the dream first, build the reality later. He promised features that didn't yet exist, convinced clients they were already installed, and ordered his engineers to make them real before the next sunrise. It was reckless, brilliant, and utterly Ellison. But arrogance has gravity. In 1990, the dream nearly collapsed. The books were chaos, sales inflated, cash vanishing. Oracle was on the edge of bankruptcy. Reporters predicted its death. Investors fled. For most CEOs, it would have been the end. For Larry, it was baptism. He fired hundreds, rewrote the company's accounting systems, and rebuilt Oracle's products from the ground up. He didn't apologize. He doubled down. "You don't retreat from chaos," he told his board. "You engineer it." That crisis became his crucible. It stripped away illusion and left only will. He rebuilt Oracle into something leaner, faster, deadlier. The company rose from near ruin stronger than ever, powered by a new generation of software that would dominate global business infrastructure. Ellison called it the second founding. After that, he saw business differently. Competitors weren't rivals, they were prey. He studied their weaknesses, waited for their mistakes, then struck with surgical precision. When Microsoft and IBM underestimated him, he turned their arrogance into ammunition. He weaponized marketing, seduced customers with speed and certainty, and turned Oracle into the world's standard for data control. He often said, "Competition makes me faster. Enemies make me better." Behind the fury, though, was philosophy. Larry believed chaos was the natural state of the universe, and control could only be earned through constant struggle. He didn't want comfort. He wanted conquest. His heroes weren't diplomats. They were warriors. Alexander, Musashi, Hannibal. He wasn't building a company. He was training an army. By the end of the 1990s, Oracle wasn't just selling databases. It was running governments, airlines, armies, and banks. The invisible architecture of civilization itself. Larry Ellison had rewritten the rules of business warfare. He had proven that power doesn't come from perfection. It comes from persistence and the refusal to surrender. In the chaos of the valley, he wasn't just another CEO. He was the general who learned to turn fire into fuel. By the turn of the millennium, Larry Ellison had achieved what most men only imagine: wealth beyond measure, global influence, and a company that pulsed at the center of the digital world. Oracle's software was the bloodstream of modern civilization, and Ellison, its architect, was now among the richest men on earth. But to him, victory was not a destination. It was oxygen. The moment he stopped chasing, he feared he'd stop breathing. He lived fast, dangerously, extravagantly, the anti-Steve Jobs. While others in Silicon Valley wore jeans and humility, Ellison built his life like a samurai epic. He owned a fleet of jets, raced yachts in the America's Cup, and constructed an exact replica of a 16th-century Japanese village in California, complete with waterfalls and koi ponds. It wasn't vanity. It was theater. An empire built to remind the world, and perhaps himself, that he had conquered the void he was born into. Every detail of his world mirrored his mind, beautiful, engineered, and under total control. He designed Oracle the same way, an extension of his will. His executives called him the pilot who never turns on autopilot. He scrutinized everything: product design, marketing copy, even the color of presentation slides. "If I can't control it," he said, "it doesn't exist." That obsession produced miracles and casualties. Employees burned out, partners broke down, competitors fell. Larry didn't hide his appetite for conflict. He fed on it. "If there's no enemy," he once joked, "I'll create one." His rivalry with Bill Gates became legend. Two titans, locked in a philosophical war. Gates, the pragmatist builder. Ellison, the defiant emperor. He mocked Microsoft publicly, calling their software a digital hairball. Reporters loved him for it. Investors worshipped him for it. He ruled Oracle like a warlord of efficiency. Meetings were battlegrounds. Words were weapons. His lieutenants learned to survive by precision and fear. "Don't bring me opinions," he'd say. "Bring me numbers." Yet for all the intensity, people followed him because they knew, beneath the arrogance, there was genius. He could see patterns others missed, predict shifts in the industry years before they happened. When cloud computing was dismissed as fantasy, Larry saw its inevitability. He positioned Oracle to dominate before others even understood the threat. But obsession has a cost. His personal life was fractured. 4 marriages, countless affairs, few lasting friendships. Even his children would later describe him as a man who loved deeply but lived elsewhere, always chasing a storm of his own creation. At night, aboard his private yacht cutting through black water, he often worked alone for hours, gazing at his reflection in the glass. The sea, vast and merciless, was the only thing he couldn't control. He was the most powerful outsider in history, a man who turned rejection into religion and perfection into prison. Larry Ellison built an empire not from peace, but from tension. Fueled by ego, sharpened by pain, and sustained by the belief that victory was never permanent. He wasn't just building a company. He was building proof that the boy who was told he'd never be enough could one day own the world. And the proof, at least for now, was undeniable. By the time Oracle ruled the digital backbone of the modern world, Larry Ellison had everything and nothing. He was a billionaire many times over. The Oracle of data. The man who could buy islands, fleets, and nations' worth of influence. Yet beneath the gloss of victory, a question began to haunt him. What do you control when you already control everything? Power had brought him distance. His friends were few, his rivals many, and his family, scattered like shadows behind the light of his empire. His marriages had failed, one after another, casualties of obsession. His children admired him, feared him, but rarely saw him. "My father's home," one of them once said, "was always a cockpit, not a house." Ellison had built a kingdom out of certainty, but life, unlike code, refused to obey. Age began to whisper what ambition had drowned out. He watched younger founders, Musk, Bezos, Zuckerberg, rise with the same hunger he once carried. But while they chased the sky, he began to look inward. In 2010, he stunned the industry by buying the Hawaiian island of Lanai, nearly the entire thing, 98% of it. But he didn't buy it for vanity. He bought it to build an experiment, a self-sustaining ecosystem powered by renewable energy, clean food, and digital precision. It was a reflection of his lifelong paradox, the need to control nature in order to protect it. Still, the weight of control grew heavier. Lawsuits, congressional investigations, antitrust hearings. The same ruthlessness that built Oracle now turned against him. He faced criticism for arrogance, environmental hypocrisy, corporate dominance. He didn't apologize. He rarely ever did. "I'm not here to be loved," he said. "I'm here to win." But for the first time, the tone had softened. Just slightly. He began speaking more about mortality, about meaning, about the illusion of mastery. "We can't stop death," he admitted once, "but maybe we can slow it down." He poured billions into medical research, longevity startups, and AI-driven health data, still chasing immortality, but this time with quieter purpose. He had conquered markets, defeated titans, and written his name into the source code of civilization. Yet what he sought now wasn't victory. Yet what he sought now wasn't a victory. It was peace. Ellison began to retreat more often to the Pacific, sailing his yacht through silence alone with the horizon. The ocean, endless, uncontrollable, had become his only equal. He once confessed, "I've spent my whole life trying to control everything. Maybe that's why I'm still not free." That was the cost of control. the realization that no amount of power could command the tides, or time, or the loneliness of a man who won every battle but never learned to surrender. For Larry Ellison, mastery had always been the goal. But now, he was beginning to learn that perhaps the greatest kind of mastery is learning when to let go. In the end, Larry Ellison's story isn't about wealth, or software, or even power. It's about obsession, the kind that burns through decades, reshapes industries, and leaves a man standing alone on the shore of his own empire, wondering what it was all for. When he looks out over the blue expanse of the Pacific from his island of Lanai, he no longer sees conquest. He sees continuity. What once was his battlefield has become his sanctuary. He now speaks of sustainability, of restoring coral reefs, of reimagining the island as a living laboratory for balance, a word he once despised. If you can design systems, he said, why not design harmony? He still runs Oracle, still commands with precision, but the fire has cooled into something quieter, a search for meaning. In interviews, he talks about death not as an ending, but as an unsolved equation. We can't cheat mortality, he said once, but we can give life more time to create. It's a rare moment of humility from a man who once swore he'd never bow to anything. His legacy is paradoxical, like the man himself. To some, he's a symbol of ego and excess, the billionaire warrior who fought at everyone and everything. To others, he's the ultimate outsider who proved that rebellion could build empires. But to those who look closer, Ellison's story reveals something deeper. That control was never his real goal. Understanding was. He didn't just build Oracle, he built an architecture for modern civilization. Every transaction, every bank record, every government database. Somewhere, an Oracle system is running quietly beneath the surface, holding the digital skeleton of our world together. His fingerprints are everywhere, invisible yet indispensable. He once told a young engineer, the point isn't to live forever. It's to build something that does, and in that sense, he already has. Oracle became his cathedral, not to himself, but to the power of order born from chaos. He coded his philosophy into its DNA, precision, dominance, resilience. Yet even he now admits that true power lies in adaptation, in letting systems evolve beyond their creator's control. Ellison is older now, his face marked by the years, but the eyes remain sharp, the same defiant fire that built an empire from nothing. He no longer races yachts to prove a point. He races time itself with one final project, ensuring that the systems he built serve humanity longer than he ever could. Because after a lifetime spent commanding machines, Larry Ellison has discovered the most human truth of all, that freedom is not the absence of control, but the courage to trust what you've built to live without you. He didn't just write code, he wrote a doctrine of defiance, discipline, and evolution. Larry Ellison's empire may have been born from the hunger to rule, but his legacy, the one that endures, is a lesson in release. Because in the end, even the man who sought to master everything had to learn that the greatest system of all is the one that finally learns to run on its own.